So, my name's Jay Harshman. I take care of the Gold King mine up here in the old ghost town of Haynes, Arizona. This was a operation that first started through the Haynes Copper Corporation. A much smaller mining town in operation from Jerome, which is just a mile down off the mountain. Give you a size scale between the two sites of Jerome and Haynes, Arizona. Jerome was active from 1876 all the way up until 1953. They have dozens of entrances with about 87 miles of tunnel systems underneath their town and their deepest shaft running straight down 4,600 some odd feet. Their average population was 2,000 with a height of 18,000. That's not even including migrant workers. It was estimated that 24,000 people lived and worked in Jerome's area, and they accumulated a profit of $1 billion throughout their history from 1876 all the way up until 1953, and that's $1 billion back in their day's money. Now where you're at right now is the old ghost town of Haynes, Arizona, started by the Haynes Copper Corporation. They first started coming out here in the 1890s, trying to strike it big like Jerome's corporation did. They didn't. Essentially what this place was, it was an exploratory mine. It was active from the 1890s all the way up until 1936. Didn't become an active township until 1906. Developed by the Haynes Copper Corporation, they called it Haynes, Arizona after the corporation's name. Operations here in the hand of Haynes's corporation was from the 1890s up until 1914. Now, they developed, when the Haynes Corporation was here, they developed 8 entrances. A little over 5 miles of tunnel systems are underneath this old ghost town now, and the deepest shaft here goes straight down 1,270 feet deep. And essentially what they were doing here, this was an exploratory mine. They're going down into the tunnel systems that they developed, and they located an ore body, and then they mapped out the ore body. And what they're doing, they're going down there, and they got these big old long drills that can extend up to 2,000 feet long. They're going every which way, essentially playing connect the dots, mapping out an ore body that's underneath us. And then going in and pulling out core samples from that ore body, testing the yield to see how feasible it is to mine it out and what kind of profits they would make from the ore body. So the Haynes Corporation was up here until 1914. Now what was happening in 1914 and a couple years prior, and this was happening in Jerome too, but it was really bad out here, was when they were digging their tunnel systems, they were blasting and drilling into underground water tables that are in this mountain. There's 3 of them. There's one above us, which is where we get our water from, Jerome and here in Haynes. We get our water from a spring, all good, clean mountain water. There's one below us, and there's one real deep down. Well, they're tapping into them, men were getting flooded out. They're drowning to death, being buried alive. There's boilers down there that combusted once that cold water hit those hot boilers. Essentially, the men got fed up with their fellow men dying, and they went on strike. First shut this mine in operation down in 1914. The Haynes Corporation then sold it to Jerome's corporation, which was United Valley Copper Corporation, and then they came back out here in 1917. Tried to continue operations in that shaft we have, and within that same year, miners went on strike again. They're like, this sucks, and essentially shut that shaft in operations again in 1917. They then went to the other 7 entrances that are just more up in the hills. They're not accessible to the public. They're not a part of the museum. Only that 1,200-foot shaft is a part of the museum. But they went to the other 7 entrances and continued that exploratory mining, pulling out core samples, mapping out that rest of the ore body up until 1936. Once they mapped it all out, they had to decide whether or not it was financially feasible enough to come up here and mine this ore body out. They didn't, because they couldn't reallocate resources at that time period to come out here and mine out this ore body that's underneath this old town of Haynes. This ore body that they ended up finding, though, it was rich. Had primarily copper with byproducts of gold and silver, and along with some other alloys as well. And this ore body is what the metal is being formed in. This ore body portions of it are 3 feet wide, portions of it are 19 feet wide, and it goes 2,000 feet long deep into the ground. All one mass. Figure out a financially feasible way of coming up here and essentially starting a new operation up here and reallocating resources from their massive operation over in Jerome. Now, when this place shut down, the place became abandoned. The corporation brought all their equipment back to Jerome, And then the place was scavenged through. Anything and everything was taken, all the way down to floorboards of the old building. The place was picked clean. That's why they call them ghost towns, because they're leaving nothing behind but the ghosts. So, came up here, place was scavenged. Rumor has it, spiteful miners came up here too and burnt the town down. We really don't know what happened to the actual township and the industrial zone structures. That's just what we're speculating might have happened. But there's only 2 original buildings. One is the boarding house. It's up on the hill. It was built in 1906. And the other one is the assayer's office next to that outhouse, up the first flight of stairs. That one was built in the 1890s when they first started coming up here. Boarding house was for miners. There's 6 bedrooms up top. The bottom half was for Petrie. She was the madam of that boarding house, and the assayer's office is where they assessed the quality of the ore on a small scale to make sure they're digging their tunnel systems or pulling out the core samples in the correct areas. Now, what you're seeing here today is essentially one man's creation, Don Robertson. He turned this old mining town into the museum. He's the one who gave it the name the Gold King Mine. But essentially what Don's story is, and a little short story on him, he was a farm boy out in Iowa. He got educated in mechanical and structural engineering, and his first real introduction out here into the West was being a part of the London Bridge project. So they took the London Bridge, it's been in London for centuries, and stuck it out here in the desert in Arizona, over in Lake Havasu. Well, he was the third main guy on that team, in charge of structuralizing the London Bridge so he could actually drive cars over it, and this was in the late 60s, early 70s. Well, when he was out here, he fell in love with the Wild West, started exploring and collecting things, and he got to a point where he collected so much stuff that his family was like, what are you going to do with all this? And he was like, I want to find an old abandoned mine town that needs to be reborn. So a buddy on his Havasu team told him about this site here, Haynes, and he came out here in 1978. It took him about 4 years to kind of create what you're seeing. In 1982, he opened up shop, starting people come in, and his whole purpose was to show people what people were working with and living with back in the day, hence all the stuff. He was a gearhead. He loved trucks. We got a lot of trucks with a lot of old antique equipment and vehicles, and kind of just turned this old mining town into his little backyard playground. Now, along with his collection, he brought up historical buildings as well from the local area to bring them up here and preserve them, give them a new home. Those buildings come from Jerome, Clarkdale, Cottonwood. Cottonwood back in the day was Clemenceau, and Perkinsville, which is down the run of the mountain about 15 miles, and it was a midway point on the standard line that fed Jerome and this town here, Haynes. So those buildings, when you're walking around, is the outhouse that's next to that assayer's office, the schoolhouse, the dentist's office, the service station, shoe repair, laundromat, which is what we're in, and the miner's cabin next to us are all the historical buildings Don brought up from other sites to preserve them and give them a new home. Essentially, he created this old mining town into his own little museum, and that's kind of what we got going on. A lot of the stuff runs, a lot of stuff we still use. So the sawmills I usually hang out around, we still cut wood with. One is a 1914 Witty hit and miss. We use it to cut dimensional lumber out of pine wood we get up in Flagstaff. There's another sawmill, which is what we use to cut hardwood slabs. It's got a bigger blade, a bit more torque behind the engine. And that engine is a 1943 Fairbanks Morris. It's a World War II diesel-powered submarine engine. Big Bertha is the other, it's the biggest engine we have running here in this museum. It's a 1930 Chicago Pneumatic. It's a 10,000 cubic inch engine. It's massive, and it powered a copper operation out here in Arizona in the 1930s. And then all the vehicles and some of the machinery that have a covering over their head, whether it's the coverings or garage, they all fire up and run, and we try to maintain them and keep them into good operating shape. We have animals. We got chickens, ducks, turkeys, a pig, Bella. We got rabbits, and we kind of just, a little farm on top of this mountain with a whole bunch of rust with it.